During the Great Depression, when money was scarce and food even scarcer, homemakers across America found a way to feed their families, creatively, frugally, and with heart. These breakfast recipes came straight from that time when real women who stretched every ingredient and still made meals that brought everyone to the table. Today, we're opening up a Depression-era cookbook to rediscover those forgotten recipes and the wisdom they hold for us now. My name is Jenna Lee, and I'm restoring home, family, and spirit through tried and true homemaking skills. Lately, I came across a book called Stories and Recipes of the Great Depression of the 1930s, which is a compilation of quotes, stories, and recipes from the 1930s. And I just think it's such a treasure. I love turning my heart and mind over to things of the past and how they used to get by during hard times. So for our first recipe, Evelyn's breakfast cornmeal pudding, it's very similar to how I make grits. Our family does eat lots of grits, and my kids just love it, having it savory, having it with milk and sugar. But I also know that corn and cornmeal was a staple for early American pioneers, and it was easy to get your hands on, and it was much cheaper than other wheat varieties. And I assume that maybe that was a similar case for those in the early 1900s and in the 1930s as well. Evelyn is such a beautiful old-fashioned name, and it's actually the name of my youngest daughter. So of course, for some sentimental reasons, I chose this recipe. What's different than how I make my grits is that we are slowly pouring in some eggs into this recipe. So it's a little bit thicker, very creamy, and I like the added protein that is in this Evelyn's cornmeal pudding. In the Great Depression era, not all ingredients were always plentiful, and they didn't have everything all the time. So I'm sure if they had cream, it was a special treat, and especially some brown sugar. I did read a story from this book that talked about how scarce cream was, and it was all used to make butter, except for on Sundays when they could have it some with their porridge or with their breakfast. In the book, this next recipe is called Sam's Whole Wheat Waffles, but it might as well be called, my Grandma and Grandpa Peabody's homemade waffles, because it is very similar to the recipe. And if you went over to my 94-year-old grandpa's house for breakfast, he would make you this recipe today. And the secret to these waffles and making them light and fluffy is whipping the egg whites. So I am using whole wheat flour for this recipe, and if I could make one exchange, it would be to use milk instead of water and dry milk, just for flavor preferences. In the beginning of this book, they share a cute story of how the waffle received its name, and I wanted to share it with you guys. It is said to have been made in the 13th century England. A crusader wearing his armor accidentally sat in some freshly baked oat cakes. The cakes were flattened and bore deep imprints in the steel links. However, he spread butter on the cakes and ate them. His wife, delighted with the way the butter stayed in the imprints from the armor, and made him put it on once a week and sit on fresh oat cakes. The Dutch would actually call them Waffles or Warfries, if that's how you say it. And they brought them over to America. They had long-handled irons that were very heavy to hold over an open fire. But I'm glad that we have simple and easy to use waffle irons today. The key to this 1930s waffle recipe is to beat the egg whites till they form soft peaks and then gently fold in the egg whites into the batter. And then bake on a greased griddle and serve hot with Wisconsin maple syrup. I have memories of watching my grandma brush her waffle iron with a brush and some grease just like this. And with all of the recipes I'm using today, I'm using beef tallow that I rendered myself. My grandma would always serve her waffles with real maple syrup or currant syrup that she made from her currant bush in the backyard. My grandparents would have been infants or very small children during the Great Depression time, but it was very apparent that they did grow up during that time, or at least were raised by parents who lived it. My grandparents taught me so many things about being resourceful and living within or below your means, cooking from scratch, and being innovative. When we were at Grandma's house, we knew to never waste any food that was on our plates. Grandma was nuts about not wasting anything. She always kept a really full food pantry and food storage downstairs, and she preserved whatever was in season and tried to cook from scratch as much as she could. And she never had excessive snacks in her kitchen. We were lucky if we could find fruit roll-ups in a cookie jar on the counter. So things weren't fancy, they definitely weren't perfect, but they were always healthy and wholesome and sensible.
In the summer, we love to garden. In fact, a lot of the foods that you see me preparing in the kitchen are from our own garden. I've got onions and potatoes curing on the porch. We're just about to pick a bunch of green beans as well. And it's a lot to keep up on. It's really hot here in Missouri. It's 90 degrees right now and 70% humidity. So you can just imagine how we are sweating through our clothes as we're working out here. I've noticed a huge difference in my health since I've started drinking an Element electrolyte drink every single day. I started when I was a nursing mother and I was getting migraines every single day. Element electrolyte drinks are packed with 1,000 milligrams of sodium, 200 milligrams of potassium, and 60 milligrams of magnesium. And you actually don't need a ton of sugar to help absorb those electrolytes into your system. And that's also another thing I love about Element is that there's no sugar, there's no food colorings, no additives, and the flavors are on point. When we have friends and family over, I like to put a couple of Element packets into a pitcher of ice water, and that's what I feed my guests. And all of them ask what we're drinking, and all of them love it. I usually send them home with a couple of packets, and they usually make an order. Everyone seems to love Element. I know you guys are gonna love them too. So make sure to follow the link. I'm gonna put it down in the description box. Go to drinkelement.com/pioneerhome, and they will gift you with a free sample pack with 8 of their most beloved flavors. And I hope you can all properly stay hydrated this summer and throughout the year. Thanks so much for sponsoring today's video, Element.
This next breakfast was certainly meant to stick to your bones and stick with you for a while. It says that it was good for wood cutting, a wood cutting breakfast, and also known as the hunter's breakfast. And it really is just a beef and potato patty. It said to use 4 coarsely grated peeled potatoes that were cooked, preferably with the jackets on. And I'm assuming with the jackets on means that it has the skins. So if you have any comments about that, make sure to comment down below. Let me know what you think that means and to form them into patties. It also mentions to cook up your hamburger beforehand and cook it until it's gray and then drain. I actually ended up using raw beef and mixing that with the potatoes and just making the patties. I missed that step. So I really think the idea here is to mix already cooked hamburger with some cooked potatoes. And I can just really see a homemaker using her leftover mashed potatoes maybe some leftover meat or beef in this case, mixing those up, forming it into a patty, and calling it breakfast, calling it a hunter's breakfast. I'm sure that they were always finding ways to use their leftovers for the following day. It just amazes me how resourceful these women were and had to be, finding different ways to use leftovers and maybe a couple potatoes they had. I can really see them adding all sorts of things to these patties or using different cooked meat that they have. For this last recipe, I'm going to be making my zucchini fritters. I make these all throughout the summer, but they're really inspired by this squash griddle cakes recipe that is in this 1930s cookbook. I'm really wanting to try that recipe coming this fall when we have all of those autumn squashes in season, pumpkin, butternut squash, acorn, all of the squashes. And this recipe will be down in the description box below, along with all of the other Great Depression recipes. But since I have loads of zucchini coming out of the garden right now, it just makes sense to use this zucchini fritters recipe that I make all the time. So I'm going to share that with you guys today. And I always like to say, you know you have a friend when you have zucchini on your doorstep. So if you have any favorite zucchini recipes that you can share with our friends here on the channel, put those down in the comments below. For the zucchini fritters or cakes that I'm making right now, it's about 2 cups of zucchini shredded, and I sprinkle it with salt, and then I drain all of the juices out, and I add about a half a cup of flour, 1/4 a cup of Parmesan cheese, salt and pepper, and 1 egg. Sometimes I like to add green onions fresh from the garden, and I simply just fry those up on a hot griddle. I absolutely love collecting old cookbooks, especially things like this 1930s cookbook. And if you do too, it's called Stories and Recipes of the Great Depression of the 1930s by Rita Van Amber. And it really is so good. And I've enjoyed so much just reading through the recipes and quotes and stories that are in here. There's so much that we can apply from the way that our grandmothers or great-grandmothers made it through hard times. They had so much gratitude and grit, and they earned that badge through making it through those tough times. I would love to hear from you down in the comments below if you have any stories or recipes that you would like to share. And it doesn't have to be just from the 1930s. Today I really focused in on that because of this cookbook that I had been reading. But my true focus really is restoring home, family, and spirit through all the good and beautiful ways of homemaking. all the things that we can learn from the past. And I hope you enjoyed being here with me today. I invite you to subscribe, say hello in the comments, and I will see you all next week for another video. Love you lots.